The conference room smelled like stale coffee and desperation. I sat at the long mahogany table with my court-appointed advocate beside me, Miss Brennan, a sharp woman in her 50s who specialized in elder rights cases. Across from us sat my son David, age 45, and his wife Stephanie, both dressed like they were heading to a corporate merger instead of deciding whether to warehouse their mother in a nursing home. The mediator, Mr. Walsh, a gray-haired man with kind eyes, was reviewing documents when my 14-year-old granddaughter Emma stood up from the corner where she'd been sitting quietly. "Excuse me." Her voice rang out, clear despite the tremor I could hear underneath. "Before you make any decisions, I need to show you something my grandmother doesn't know I have." Every head in the room turned. David's face went from confident to cautious in an instant. Stephanie's perfectly lipsticked mouth fell open slightly. Mr. Walsh leaned forward. "Young lady, this is a legal mediation. What's your name?" "Emma Patterson, sir." "Mrs. Patterson is my grandmother. And what I have proves she doesn't need a nursing home. She needs protection from my father." My hand flew to my chest. David shot to his feet. "Emma, sit down. This is completely inappropriate. She's been living with my mother, Mr. Walsh, and clearly has been influenced." "Let her speak, miss," Brennan said firmly, giving me a quick glance. I was as shocked as everyone else. Emma pulled out her phone with shaking hands. "I've been recording my parents for the past 2 months. I know it's wrong, but I needed proof of what they're really trying to do." The color drained from Stephanie's face. David's jaw clenched, and when Emma pressed play, my whole world shifted. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me tell you how a 68-year-old widow ended up fighting her own son for her freedom. 6 months earlier, I was living in the home my husband Thomas and I had bought 40 years ago in Maple Grove, Connecticut. Thomas had passed away 2 years before from a sudden heart attack. He'd been a successful commercial real estate developer, and he'd left me well provided for. The house was paid off. I had a substantial investment portfolio, retirement accounts, and about $800,000 in liquid assets. By any measure, I was financially secure. I was also lonely. Thomas and I had always been partners in everything. We'd met in college, married at 23, built his business together. I'd handled the books while he handled the deals. When he died, I felt like half of me was gone. David started calling more after his father passed. At first, I thought it was genuine concern. He'd come by for Sunday dinners, bring Stephanie and Emma. He'd check on the house, ask about my finances, offer to help with paperwork. His sister Rebecca lived in California and couldn't visit often, so David became my primary family contact. "Mom, this house is getting too big for you," he said one Sunday over pot roast, about 8 months after Thomas died. "Have you thought about downsizing?" "I love this house," I said, looking around at the dining room where we'd hosted 20 years of Thanksgivings. "Your father and I made it a home. But it's a lot of maintenance, especially now that you're alone," Stephanie chimed in, her voice syrupy with false concern. "And you're not getting any younger, Helen." I was 66. I played tennis twice a week. I volunteered at the library. I was on the board of the community theater. I wasn't exactly decrepit. "I'm managing just fine," I said, keeping my tone light. Emma, who'd been quiet, spoke up. "I think Grandma's house is perfect. Can I come stay with you this summer, Grandma?" "Of course, sweetheart," I said, grateful for her support. David's expression tightened. "We'll see about that. Emma has camp." The comments about the house continued over the following months. Every visit brought new concerns. The stairs were dangerous. The yard was too much work. The neighborhood was changing. I was stubborn, but I started to wonder if maybe they had a point. Then the incident started. I missed a dentist appointment because I'd written down the wrong date. David was there when the office called to reschedule. "Mom, that's the 3rd appointment you've missed this year," he said, his voice heavy with manufactured concern. It was actually the 1st, but I didn't correct him. Maybe I was getting forgetful. I left the stove on after making tea one morning, the kitchen filled with smoke from the empty kettle. I caught it before anything serious happened, but David somehow found out. "Mom called me in a panic about leaving the stove on," he told Stephanie while I was in the bathroom during their next visit. "I heard them through the heating vent. She's getting dangerous." I hadn't called him. He'd called me that afternoon, and I'd mentioned it casually. Now it was a panic call. I started keeping a journal, noting every conversation, every visit, every comment. Something felt off, but I couldn't articulate what. The breaking point came 4 months ago. I'd gone to the bank to wire money to Rebecca for her birthday, $500 like I did every year. The teller, a young woman I'd never seen before, seemed nervous. "Mrs. Patterson, I need to verify this transaction with your son David. He's on your account as power of attorney." My blood went cold. "No, he's not. This is my account, my individual account." She showed me the paperwork. There was my signature, adding David as joint owner with power of attorney rights, dated 3 months prior. I hadn't signed it. I called Miss Brennan that afternoon. She was a friend of a friend who specialized in elder law. Within an hour, I was in her office. "This is a forgery," she said, examining the signature under a magnifying glass. "It's good, but it's not yours. See how the H loops differently? Can they do that? Just forge my signature and take control of my accounts?" "They can try. The bank shouldn't have processed it without you present, but sometimes staff get pressured by smooth-talking relatives." She leaned back. "Mrs. Patterson? Helen, I need to ask you something direct. Do you think your son is trying to gain control of your finances?" "I think my son is trying to put me in a nursing home so he can have my money," I heard myself say. Saying it out loud made it real, and I started crying for the first time since Thomas died. Not tears of grief, but tears of betrayal. Miss Brennan handed me tissues and started making calls. By the end of the day, the bank had frozen the account, pending investigation. I'd moved my money to a new bank across town, and I'd changed the locks on my house. David showed up that evening, using his key. When it didn't work, he rang the doorbell. I didn't answer. He called my cell. I didn't pick up. He sent texts, first concerned, then angry. "Mom, why aren't you answering? Did you change the locks? What's wrong?" Then, "Mom, Stephanie and I are worried about you. This paranoid behavior isn't normal." Then, "Fine. If you want to cut out your only local family, that's your choice. But don't come crying when you need help." I forwarded every text to Miss Brennan. 2 weeks later, David filed a petition for guardianship and conservatorship, claiming I was suffering from dementia and could no longer manage my affairs or make sound decisions. The petition included statements from Dr. Morrison, my longtime physician, claiming I'd shown signs of cognitive decline at recent appointments. The problem? I hadn't seen Dr. Morrison in 6 months. My last checkup had been routine and uneventful. When Miss Brennan contacted Dr. Morrison's office, we discovered David had called pretending to be worried about my memory. He described incidents, fabricated symptoms, and asked leading questions. Dr. Morrison, never having examined me for these supposed issues, had unfortunately written notes based on what David reported. Those notes became the basis for his statement. It was fraud, it was elder abuse, and it was terrifyingly effective. The court appointed a guardian ad litem to investigate and scheduled a mediation before the hearing. That's where Emma came in. I'd called Emma twice after I changed the locks, just to hear her voice. We'd always been close. She was a thoughtful kid, quieter than most teenagers, the kind who noticed things other people missed. Both times I called, the conversations were brief and felt strained. I assumed David had poisoned her against me. What I didn't know was that Emma had been listening to her parents for months and recording them. Now, in that conference room, Emma pressed play on her phone. David's voice filled the room, crystal clear. The petition's filed. Once the judge appoints a guardian, we can move her into Meadowbrook and sell the house. Stephanie's voice. How long will it take? Walsh said probably 60 days for the full process, but the temporary guardianship should go through next week. Then we can start liquidating assets. What if she fights it? David laughed. It was a cold sound I'd never heard from my son before. With what? Brennan's a decent lawyer, but we have medical documentation. Mom's been exhibiting clear signs of dementia. The missed appointments, the stove incident, the paranoia about the bank, it's all documented. You documented it, you mean? Stephanie's voice held a note of nervousness. I documented what any concerned son would document. Doctor. Morrison's notes support the pattern. The bank incident proves she's not competent to manage money. The case is solid. What about Rebecca? Rebecca's 3,000 miles away and barely calls. By the time she figures out what's happening, it'll be done. Mom will be safely in Meadowbrook, the house will be sold, and we'll have access to the accounts. Safely warehoused, you mean? David's voice turned sharp. She's my mother, not a storage unit. Meadowbrook is a quality facility. It's also $17,000 a month. That'll drain her accounts in what, 4 years? 5 if we're conservative. But the house should clear $800,000 after commission. That's another 5 years. By then, she'll be 80. Honestly, Steph, we're doing her a favor. She shouldn't be living alone anyway. And the fact that we're drowning in credit card debt and Cameron needs tuition money has nothing to do with it? That's not why we're doing this. But it doesn't hurt. There was a pause. Then David again. Mom had a good life. Dad left her set up. Is it so wrong that some of that money should help her grandkids, help her son? She'd want that if she was thinking clearly. She'd want a say in it. She's not capable of making that decision anymore. That's why the guardianship is necessary. Look, I know this is uncomfortable, but sometimes you have to make hard choices for the people you love. Mom can't see what's best for her right now. We can. The recording clicked off. The silence in the conference room was absolute. Mr. Walsh's face had gone from neutral mediator to barely controlled anger. Miss Brennan was gripping her pen so hard her knuckles were white. I sat frozen, listening to my son casually plan to steal my life. David found his voice first. That was taken out of context. Emma, you have no idea what you're doing. I know exactly what I'm doing, Dad. I'm stopping you from stealing from Grandma. Stephanie spoke up, her voice shrill. Emma, go wait in the car. Now. No. Emma's voice was steady. I'm not leaving Grandma. Mr. Walsh held up his hand. Everyone remained calm. Emma, I need to verify what we just heard. That was your father's voice? Yes, sir. Recorded in our kitchen 3 weeks ago. They thought I was at my friend Olivia's house, but I came home early and heard them talking, so I started recording. You've been spying on us? David's face was red. That's a violation of privacy. You're trying to lock up your mother and steal her money, Miss Brennan said coldly. I think we can overlook the privacy issue. Mr. Walsh looked at me. Mrs. Patterson, were you aware of this recording? I shook my head, unable to speak. Emma crossed the room and took my hand. I'm sorry, Grandma. I should have told you sooner, but I wanted to make sure I had enough proof. I know what they were planning would hurt you, and I couldn't let that happen. I pulled her into my arms, this brave child who'd fought for me when I couldn't fight for myself. You have nothing to apologize for, sweetheart. Mr. Walsh was writing rapidly. Mr. Patterson, Mrs. Patterson, I'm suspending this mediation and recommending the immediate dismissal of the guardianship petition. I'm also obligated to report suspected financial exploitation to Adult Protective Services. David surged to his feet. This is ridiculous. That recording proves nothing, except that my wife and I were discussing care options for my mother, difficult conversations that families have. Conversations, Miss Brennan said quietly, about stealing her house and liquidating her assets against her will, about fabricating medical evidence, about warehousing her in a facility to drain her money. Those aren't care options, Mr. Patterson. That's exploitation. I want that recording, David demanded. It's inadmissible anyway. Recorded without consent in a two-party consent state. Actually, Emma said, pulling out a small notebook, Connecticut is a one-party consent state. I checked. I'm allowed to record conversations I'm part of or conversations that happen in shared spaces in my own home, and I have more. She scrolled through her phone. 7 more recordings. Dad talking to his friend Mark about how much equity is in Grandma's house. Mom and Dad arguing about whether this is going too far. Dad coaching someone on the phone about what to say to Dr. Morrison's office. And this one. She pressed play. David's voice again, but different this time, talking to someone on the phone. She's becoming combative and paranoid. Yesterday she accused me of trying to steal from her. She's clearly declining rapidly. A pause. No, I don't think an exam is necessary at this point. Based on my observations as her primary caregiver and the documented incidents, I think a statement of concern for the court would be sufficient. Another pause. Thank you, doctor. I know this is difficult, but I'm trying to do what's best for my mother. Emma stopped the recording. That was Dad calling Dr. Morrison's office 2 months ago. Grandma wasn't becoming paranoid. She was figuring out what you were doing. Dr. Morrison's statement suddenly made sense. David had fed him carefully curated lies, and the doctor had trusted a concerned son. Mr. Walsh looked at David with something close to disgust. "Mr. Patterson, you have two options. You can withdraw the guardianship petition now and walk away, or I can make my report to APS and recommend the court investigate you for attempted financial exploitation, fraud, and elder abuse. Your choice." David's lawyer, a young man who'd been silent until now, whispered urgently in his ear. David's face cycled through emotions: anger, fear, calculation. Finally he stood. "This is a misunderstanding blown out of proportion by a child with an overactive imagination and a lawyer looking for billable hours. But I don't want to put my mother through any more stress. I'm withdrawing the petition." "Smart choice," Miss Brennan said. "But Mrs. Patterson will be filing for a restraining order, and I'll be recommending the district attorney's office review Emma's recordings for potential criminal charges." Stephanie grabbed her purse. "Come on, David, let's go." "Emma," David said, his voice strained. "Let's go, now." Emma looked at me, then at her father. "No. I'm not going with you. You're 14 years old. You don't get to decide where you live." "Actually, Miss," Brennan interjected. "At 14, Connecticut courts give significant weight to a child's preference in custody matters. And given what Emma just revealed, I don't think any judge would force her to return to a home where her parents were actively planning to victimize her grandmother." "This is parental alienation," Stephanie hissed. "This is a child making a moral choice," Mr. Walsh said firmly. "Emma can remain with her grandmother while the adults sort this out. Mr. Patterson, Mrs. Patterson, I suggest you consult with your attorney about your next steps. This meeting is concluded." David and Stephanie left without another word. The door closed behind them with a quiet click that somehow felt final. The legal aftermath took 3 months to fully resolve. David and Stephanie withdrew the guardianship petition, but only after the DA's office opened an investigation into attempted financial exploitation. The forged power of attorney signatures were examined by handwriting experts. David claimed he'd filled out the forms for my convenience, and I'd signed them but forgot. The experts disagreed. The signature wasn't even close. Dr. Morrison was horrified when he learned he'd been manipulated. He insisted on giving me a full cognitive evaluation, which I passed with flying colors. His official statement to the court: "Mrs. Patterson shows no signs of dementia or cognitive impairment. She is fully competent to manage her own affairs. I deeply regret that my trust in her son's reports led to inaccurate documentation." The DA ultimately didn't file criminal charges. "There wasn't enough evidence to prove criminal intent beyond reasonable doubt," he said. But the investigation was enough. David's reputation in Maple Grove was destroyed. His business partner quietly bought him out. The country club where he and Stephanie were members suddenly had no availability for them at social events. Rebecca flew in from California when I told her what happened. She cried when she heard Emma's recordings. "I should have been there," she kept saying. "I should have known." "He was careful," I told her. "He knew exactly what to say and how to say it. If Emma hadn't been listening, if she hadn't been brave enough to document it, I might be in Meadowbrook right now." Emma had moved in with me the day of the mediation. Her things arrived in boxes over the next week. David and Stephanie didn't fight it. I think they knew they'd lost. Emma didn't need therapy, thank God, though Miss Brennan recommended it and I made sure the option was there. "I'm okay, Grandma," Emma told me. "I'm not sad about leaving them. I'm angry at what they tried to do to you, but I'm not sad about stopping them." Does that make sense? Perfect sense, sweetheart. Mom asked me once if I felt guilty for recording them. I don't. They were planning something terrible. Someone had to do something. We did have family counseling for a while, just to make sure Emma processed everything in a healthy way. The therapist said Emma's response was actually very mature. She saw an injustice, gathered evidence, and acted to stop it. That's not trauma. That's moral courage. That was 6 months ago. I'm 68 now, still living in my home in Maple Grove. Emma is thriving. She's in a new school, closer to my house, and she's on the debate team. "I'm going to be a prosecutor," she announced last month. "Someone who stops bad people from hurting good people." "You'd be phenomenal at that," I told her. I've made some changes since the mediation. Miss Brennan helped me set up an irrevocable trust for my assets, with Rebecca and an independent trustee as co-trustees. Emma is the primary beneficiary, with provisions for her education and future. David is explicitly excluded. The house is in the trust. My accounts are in the trust. Even if someone did somehow gain guardianship over me someday, they couldn't touch those assets. I also went back to work, sort of. I'd kept up my CPA license after Thomas died, more out of habit than need. Now I'm consulting for a firm downtown 3 days a week, helping small business owners with their books. It turns out 40 years of managing a successful real estate business makes you very employable, even at 68. I joined a book club. I'm taking a watercolor class at the community center. Last month, Emma and I went to New York City for a weekend, saw 3 Broadway shows, ate too much good food. She wants to apply to Columbia for college. I told her I'd help with tuition. As for David, I haven't spoken to him since the mediation. He sent emails, always late at night. They start apologetic and end angry. I was only trying to help you, Mom. I'm sorry you chose to believe the worst of me. I hope someday you'll see I was acting out of love. Love doesn't forge signatures. Love doesn't fabricate medical conditions. Love doesn't plan to warehouse your mother to steal her money. That wasn't love. That was something my therapist calls covert narcissism. People who abuse through manipulation and gaslighting rather than overt aggression. They're often very convincing, Dr. Hayes told me. They believe their own narratives. In David's mind, he probably does think he was helping you, that he knows what's best better than you do, that his needs are more important than your autonomy. Emma asked me once if I missed him. I thought about it carefully before answering. I miss the son I thought I had, I told her, but that person might never have existed. The real David, the one who could look at his own mother and see a bank account to drain? I don't miss him. I'm grieving for the relationship I thought we had, but I don't miss what it actually was. Sometimes I look back on those months when David was setting his trap and I wonder how I didn't see it sooner. But that's the nature of gaslighting, I've learned. You start questioning your own perception. Am I really forgetting things? Am I really getting paranoid? Maybe they're right, and I'm the problem. The journal I kept saved me almost as much as Emma's recordings did. I could look back and see that no, I wasn't forgetting appointments. No, I wasn't acting irrationally. I was noticing things that didn't add up, and my instincts were right. Trust your instincts. That's what I tell other women my age now, the ones I meet at book club or the community center or my consulting work. If something feels wrong, it probably is. Document everything, tell someone you trust, and know that it's never too late to stand up for yourself. I'm 68 years old. My husband is gone. My son tried to steal my life, but I'm here, in my home, with my granddaughter, living exactly the way I choose to live. I'm consulting, I'm painting, I'm reading and traveling and making new friends. And it's all because a 14-year-old girl loved her grandmother enough to be brave when the adults weren't. Emma saved me, yes. But more than that, she gave me permission to save myself. I keep her first recording saved on my computer, backed up in 3 places. It's a reminder that sometimes the people who see the truth most clearly are the ones we least expect. That courage doesn't always come from experience or age. Sometimes it comes from a child who knows the difference between right and wrong and chooses to act. Emma's at debate practice right now. Tonight we're making homemade pizza and watching a movie. Tomorrow I have work, and she has school. Next weekend we're driving up to Vermont to see the fall colors and visit a folk art museum she found online. It's a simple life, a free life, my life, and I'm just getting started.